Welcome back, everyone, to another Ope It's Steven video essay. In today's topic, we're going to be covering Strand, the newest Darkness subclass that launched along with Lightfall in Destiny 2. Now, I wanted to make this video to kind of summarize my overall impressions from start to finish with Strand now that I've had quite a bit of time to play with it. I fully unlocked it on my Warlock, and I'm in the process of finishing up on my Hunter and my Titan. And I figured it'd be a good idea just to overview it from many different topics, maybe compare it to some of the other subclasses, and see how it stacks up. Now, again, like most of my video essays, this is completely subjective. This is my thoughts on Strand, whether it's positive, negative, or just a little bit in the middle. I'm also going to try to keep as focused as possible. I'm slowly getting more experienced and working on my long video essay one takes here. So bear with me if I get a little rambly. I'm going to try my best not to dive into that. Now, Strand is a little different than most of the other subclasses because this is something that, as Bungie has stated in the story, we figure out. This isn't something we are taught. This is something that we discover for ourselves. And although there is a decent amount of mystery involving what the true nature of Strand is and what it means in the overall arc of light versus dark and the threads in between, etc., I'd like to just kind of throw out my opinions on the lore perspective. To start things off, that is. Lore-wise, I actually find it to be a little bit in the middle. I don't find it to be super interesting, but I also don't find it to be the most boring subclass out there. Lore-wise, I think it's cool we found out about it, and we're the ones that unlocked this ability with a little help from Osiris, but I'm not just chomping at the bit to try to figure out what Strand is and why we have happened to find it. There is a little bit there that I'm interested in learning, but mostly from a perspective in the same way I felt about Stasis, and honestly the same way I felt about the other light subclasses in the Taken King. If you do remember, we did have to unlock new abilities through that as well, and it had a designated story, purpose, whatever. I do think that where Strand really excels from a lore perspective is in the idea of the threads between light and dark, and the way that it kind of emphasizes that line that we heard back in Forsaken. The lines between light and dark are so very thin. This is the literal lines in my brain. That's how I see it every time I see Strand. And I think it's really cool that we have a subclass that allows us to interact with these fibers that are existing everywhere. There's a high focus on Neomuna, but I think that having it absolutely everywhere is fantastic. I think they did a great job at presenting it in the lore and the story, in the sense of it feels powerful, but it doesn't feel super overpowered. It feels like we're unlocking a brand new subclass and a brand new power to fight our enemies with. But it doesn't feel like this is this almighty endgame. Lore-wise, I'm sure we'll get explanations. This is a little short. I do think, however, they're on the right path. I just don't find it the most compelling, but I am hopeful that we will get more answers soon. Aesthetically, I think Strand is actually right up there with Stasis in my favorite subclass aesthetically. The way it looks, the way it operates within the world, the way it interacts with enemies. And this kind of goes into how it looks. It's also how it goes into gameplay-wise. I think we can lump these together. In my short overview script, I had these as separate topics, but I think it makes more sense to weave them together. I think the green and the neon green, especially with the threads and the tangles and interacting with the overall world, is gorgeous. I love how it stands out, and let's just be honest here. You're gonna see a strand? Tangle? You're going to see the threads, whatever the hell these things are called. You're going to see them. You're not going to miss them. It's not going to be like hiding in a corner like a Void Breach. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think that's awesome. I think they did a great job with the way it looks. Gameplay-wise, this is my favorite interaction on enemies. As you can see, tangling them up in the air and unwinding them, unraveling them, suspending them, severing them, all these verbs, and especially with the threadlings, the way that they attack, it has this beautiful balance that Stasis had. But maybe Stasis was a little too focused on ad control and area denial, and I think Strand has equally, if not better, area denial, but on top of that, it has so many awesome offensive capabilities. When you get a Warlock build moving and you're able to just throw threadlings at suspended enemies, it is amazing how fast you can clear a room. They nailed it. They absolutely crushed this, and I cannot, I can't get over how much I absolutely adore Strand now. Because I think if you watched my thoughts on Lightfall video, I did say initially that I was extremely disappointed with Strand. I thought it felt underwhelming, but my only experience was with the campaign. It was just with what we had in the campaign, where we had those little snippets of overpowered fun with the subclass when we were overcharged, and then we would get exhausted and we wouldn't have any more time to play with it. It was really scattered, and let's be honest, none of us had the best builds ready to go with Strand, and we didn't know when it was exactly coming. So we were in a situation where we wanted to dive into this beautiful, new, awesome subclass with all these incredible interactions, but we didn't have the means to do so. And when we finally felt like we were getting somewhere, they yanked it out of our hands. Now, speaking on the way that the subclass felt in the campaign and then post-campaign, now that I have spent some time with it and actually made some builds, I would have to say it ties Stasis at the low end for me. My favorite subclass will always be Void on Warlock, and it varies on the other two classes, but I'm a Warlock main. I've always loved Void. And then my second favorite was Stasis. I honestly can tell you guys right now, I think Strand overtakes Stasis on all three characters. And I think that everything feels powerful. I know everything was a meme about the Titan Strike, the Striker knockoff, or the Behemoth knockoff, another roaming super. I don't know if you guys have played with that thing. It cooks, ladies and gentlemen. That thing cooks. You move so fast. You can suspend so many things in sight. It's amazing, and I absolutely adore it. On Hunter, the mobility feeds into that fantasy of just flying around and just destroying everything in sight. It is such a well-designed subclass for a Hunter. I honestly think that they might have the best interaction out of any of the three, but of course, as a Warlock main, I had to lean into the Infinite Suspend, Osteostriga, Necrotic Grip build, and then I also had to lean into the just unbelievable amount of threadlings that you could throw out. Little minion build, and I have a blast with that too. Now, what about the fragments? You know, I was going to go through each individual fragment and talk about it, and I was going to go through the individual aspects and everything, but I thought that that might just get a little too nitpicky. You've seen plenty of other content creators talk about what they like with Strand and what they don't like, and they've leaned into these builds and everything like that. Well, I'm not a build guy. I'm more of a reaction, my feelings video essay guy, so let's stick with that. But the fragments and the way you unlock them is a little different this time around from Stasis. And I think this is a really important thing to point out, because if you guys remember, initially with Beyond Light, unlocking Stasis was an absolute nightmare. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you had to do these long quest lines to unlock a certain MacGuffin to get, oh, I don't know, what were they called? Some kind of stasis fragment item that you could spend on one fragment. Not to mention you had to unlock all the aspects, if I remember, either individually, and you had separate quests. the Born in Darkness questline, if you're really that interested, go ahead and look it up. I'm sure there's plenty of content left over from there. And it took forever. I fully got through my Warlock before they patched it and made it quicker. They made things a lot more streamlined later. But it was guys, it was a nightmare. As for Strand, it's way more streamlined. You know, you get access to the Strand subclass with your aspects, and I think the quest, if I remember correctly, leads you to be able to unlock at least 1 to 2 fragments, so you are set up on your first character. Then, as you're doing activities on Neomuna, or just activities in general, using Strand, as you can see in the background, you will pick up Strand meditations. They'll be on the ground. Certain activities also drop highly concentrated amounts of these Strand meditations. I believe you can go up to like 100 in a terminal overload, and you can go up to 250 on the activities on Neomuna. I apologize. I don't remember what it is. Partition? There it is. A quick little glance over at my notes saved me. Yes, this is way easier, more streamlined. It gives you the ability to interact with the subclass in a way that you want, and you can speed it up on doing more activities that Bungie have curated for these meditations. So it's a lot better. Having said that, I still think we're a little slow here. Nothing sucks more than getting a brand new toy at the store, and you gotta drive home and wait to finally get that bad boy opened up. And that's how I felt with Strand, is you opened up the toy, you were ready to go, and then you realized that you needed to craft AA batteries from scratch. And yes, maybe you had all the parts in the instructions, but oof. So, the meditations, let's just say we're moving forward. The third darkness subclass that we will inevitably be getting in the final shape, hopefully we can streamline this even more, but if it's the same system, I'm not going to be too upset about it. Now, I wanted to move on to talking about Strand in comparison, light comparison to the other subclasses, and I think the obvious starting point is going to be Stasis, the other darkness subclass. I believe so strongly that Stasis is a little bit power crept. I think it's still extremely viable, and it's still one of the best options in the game for GMs, high-end content, and heck, even some PvP. Stasis is really good. Do not sleep on it. But Strand did show it up just a little bit. Strand can do everything that Stasis can do, but arguably it can do it just a little bit better. And I genuinely believe that if you look at all three classes, Stasis has a couple of weak points for me. I was never jiving with the Behemoth Titan. The Hunter is fun, inevitably, for shatter skating and some movement, and when Shatter Dive was an absolute menace in the Crucible, it was a good time. However, the only viable Stasis option that I'm going out of my way to still use to this day is the Warlock one, with Bleak Watcher, Spam, Osmomancy Gloves. You know what I'm talking about. Agger's Scepter, an absolute monster of a build that can hold up against any of the Strand builds. However, I worry about Stasis in the future. Its long-term future with how well Strand performs at many things, not just one thing. I think Warlocks have it a little easier than most classes with Stasis, but we're going to need some work with the Freezy boys. Next up is Void. Void, I think, is, for me, the most comparable subclass to Strand. It has plenty of utility, and while I think Void is a little bit better in one aspect, and again, Warlock main, so I'm going to use that as an example, you can heal yourself with Void Warlock with Devour, and you can proc it constantly. Strand rather. Strand doesn't really have a way to recover health. However, it does have Woven Mail, and Woven Mail is, why need more health when just don't die? I think that Void still has a little bit more utility for me with volatile rounds. I think volatile rounds are way better than any other weapon interaction with a subclass. So I'm going to still stick by Void being my favorite, but Strand is right behind it. I'm not even kidding you guys. It's it's got the potential to really just tie some of the strongest builds we've had in this game. All right, what about Solar? Solar's tough. Solar is tough because I think Solar is overall the closest comparison on all 3 Guardian classes. I think Solar has fantastic classes on all 3 types, and so does Strand. Solar, you can heal, you can just get insane damage resistance, as in, Loreley Titans and Well of Radiance Warlocks and the Starfire build. And Strand is a little bit more of a glass cannon, and Solar is just an absolute dominant subclass for all 3 Guardians. So if I was comparing Strand to all these classes, and the one that I think is still kind of like, you could argue is a little bit better, just look to Solar. Solar's great. They did a great job. Fantastic work, Bungie. All right, now Arc. We all remember the Arc Titan last season with the Heart of Inmost Light build with Thunder Grenades was literally the one build to run in the game if you wanted to dominate endgame content like it was nothing. I think Strand wipes the floor with it. I'm going to spend the least amount of time on this comparison because while Arc is still a fantastic set of abilities for your Guardians, I think that Strand offers so much more, and it offers so much more versatility and damage resistance and, add control. While Arc is still good at all those things, I think Arc needs a little bit of love to keep up with Strand. Now to some of the loose thoughts that I have no idea where to slot in. I actually thought of this point about 20 minutes before I started recording the audio to this. Strand in GMs. I want to spend a couple minutes, maybe just a minute, talking about this. Strand in GMs is going to change the game, especially with the updated difficulty in the game. I think that this is the perfect tool to use. I've already been seeing content creators on Twitter talking about how Strand absolutely makes a laughingstock of some of the GMs we have this season, which are the hardest lineup in Season 20 that we've had since launch, in my opinion. Launch of GMs, that is. I think if you guys are struggling in GMs, look to Strand. As you can see in the background footage, look what I just did to those Centurions. Completely negated them out of the fight. Look to it. It's going to be something interesting. As for the future of Strand in the meta, and my conclusion of thoughts, I think we're in a fantastic spot here. I was really worried about Strand starting out to be a little underwhelming, and I think what I did is I let my early biases and the vibe of how the Lightfall expansion kind of landed a little flat affect not just the campaign and the story, but the subclass. After I've spent more time with it and I've been digging away, I've got builds on all 3 characters, loose builds. I think that this is really just going to take over. Now, hopefully it doesn't become a power creep situation in which you're going to only see people like, you better be running, your Woven Mail, 100 Resilience Hunter with his double grapple, and he can never die, and if you don't, you're kicked from the fire team. Let's not do that to each other, people. Let's just enjoy what we have. Let's look into the possibilities. This is a really versatile subclass, arguably the most. It does a bunch of things extremely well. It's got a couple of weaknesses. In my opinion, healing is something we might need to look into in the future. But hey, I'm actually totally cool with us not having a one-size-fits-all subclass like we did with Loreley Titans or Arc Titans or Well of Radiance Warlocks with Starfire or Omni Oculus Hunters. Let's experiment here. Let's give Strand the fair shake that I think I personally should have given since the start. And let's see what we can really do here, because I'm very excited to see the future in the meta and in the overall sandbox. It's going to be really interesting because I'm recording this in Season 20, where the future holds after we lose some of these juicy artifact perks. The unraveling rounds, a lot of that kind of stuff is going to be tied to fragments from now on, and so you're going to have to make some adjustments with your build. but the synergy with a fire team member, with somebody running Invis Hunter, maybe the Suspend Titan, and a Warlock with Well of Radiance, I don't know what's beating you. You could probably, I don't know, solo Nezarec with Strand, says the guy that will never ever be able to do that ever. Overall, I do really appreciate Bungie's hard work on this subclass. They knocked it out of the park yet again, and I would like to formally apologize for thinking that it was doo-doo caca, because let me tell you guys, it is the opposite of that. It is a great subclass. It is a phenomenal addition to the game, and I honestly, is it my second favorite? I think I have to say that. I think after Void Warlock, I think all three Strand classes take the cake for me, with Solar Warlock coming in a very close third place, maybe a 2B to Strand's 2A. I think that's going to wrap up most of my thoughts for the video. In an effort to not ramble as much as I have and be more focused, I want to spend the last minute thanking you guys so much for the awesome support I've got through these videos. I'm really enjoying making this kind of content for everybody, and I think in the future, as I get better at it, we're going to be able to be a little bit more focused, and maybe I'll stop flubbing words up, but who's to say? I want you guys in the comments section to let me know what you think of Strand. Overall, compared to the other subclasses, do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you kind of just meh it? Please, let's keep the discussion going in the comments, and remember to be respectful to each other. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. As always, massive shout out to the editor Caesar, who killed it yet again, especially when I threw a bunch of clips at him this time. If you did enjoy, make sure you like, subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.